You work hard. You stay late. You sacrifice weekends. You hit every target, go above every KPI. You build loyalty. You build trust. But when it's time for a reward, they hand your promotion to someone who's never worked for it a single day in their life. This is the story of how I turned betrayal into a billion-dollar empire. Because behind every empire is a woman they underestimated. My name is Maya Carter, and this is my voice. What you're about to hear isn't just about revenge. It's about vision, resilience, transformation. This isn't just my story, it's a blueprint. Because if they could overlook me, they can overlook anyone. And if I could rise, so can you. Let me take you back. Back to fluorescent office lights, 10-hour workdays, quiet weekends spent poring over briefs. Back to where it all started, with ambition, loyalty, and a betrayal that lit the fuse. My name is Maya Carter. I spent 7 years of my life at Ellison and Hargrove, a high-end marketing agency in downtown Chicago. I came in early, stayed late, ran meetings, and landed some of the agency's biggest accounts. I did it all without complaint, without drama. I just wanted to build something that mattered. When I joined, I was an assistant copywriter, barely trusted with a client call. But I worked relentlessly. Within 2 years, I was leading projects. Within 5, I was the unofficial team lead for the digital strategy department. And by year 7, I was managing multi-million-dollar campaigns like a general on the battlefield. I led 3 Fortune 500 campaigns. Every teammate, every client, every quarterly report said the same thing: Maya should be the next creative director. My peers supported me. My metrics spoke for themselves. Even department heads said it was just a matter of time. But when the announcement came, it wasn't me. It was Brad. Brad Ellison. The boss's 26-year-old son. Fresh off a gap year in Bali and a marketing degree he barely earned. No real experience. No battle scars. Just the last name. The office felt silent when the announcement dropped. I remember Lisa, our senior account manager, glancing at me across the table. Her mouth didn't move, but her eyes said, "I'm sorry." I faked a smile. My hands were under the table, clenched into fists. Brad stumbled through his first leadership meeting while I took notes for him. I confronted the boss. I wasn't angry, I was calm. I asked what I could have done differently. What I lacked. He said, "It's a strategic decision." That's when I realized, it was never about merit. It was about legacy. Nepotism wrapped in strategy. The following weeks were a fog. I felt invisible in my own office. Meetings where I used to lead, I was now a silent observer. Brad tried to assert dominance with buzzwords and fake confidence. But when a campaign flopped, one that I'd specifically warned him about, he blamed me. I walked out of that meeting and stood in the hallway, shaking. Lisa followed me. She looked me straight in the eyes and whispered, "You're too good for this place." And that's when I made my decision. I would not ask again. I would build my own. I didn't quit right away. That would have been emotional. Impulsive. And I wanted to be strategic, since that word was thrown in my face, I was going to redefine it. I started gathering files, contacts, metrics. Every client I'd brought in. Every win I'd delivered. I created a portfolio not for a resume, but for war. My external hard drive became my sword. My CRM notes became a map. I wasn't running. I was planning a takeover. Late one night, at a networking gala, I bumped into Cheryl Ramirez, CMO at Corvest Foods. She hugged me and said, "You're the only reason we stayed with Ellison. If you ever strike out on your own, you better call me first." That sentence echoed in my head for days. It wasn't just a compliment. It was a lifeline. I spent the next 2 weeks making a spreadsheet of potential defectors, people who trusted me, not the company. I didn't send any messages. Not yet. I just observed. Interactions. Emails. Conference calls. Who thanked me directly? Who looped me in out of habit? Who asked for Maya, not Ellison? I practiced my goodbye 100 times in front of my bathroom mirror. Then I did it. I handed in my resignation letter. No backup. No safety net. Just belief. My boss barely looked up from his laptop. "You'll be back," he said. He had no idea. I remember walking out of that glass office, the city skyline reflecting in the conference room window. It should have felt scary. But I felt lighter. Like I had just taken my first real breath in years. I moved into my cousin's unused basement. It had no windows. One desk. One chair. I bought a cheap lamp from a thrift store and a corkboard from Walmart. That was my HQ. I opened my laptop and stared at a blank inbox. Then I opened Cheryl's contact and typed, starting something new. "Want to talk?" She replied in 5 minutes, "Been waiting for this." The next day, we had coffee. The day after that, I had my first client. That was the moment everything began. I moved into my cousin's unused basement. No windows, one desk, one chair. That was my HQ. I emailed 24 clients in 3 days. Rejected by most. Ignored by more. But 3 replied. Then 1 said yes. Corvest Foods gave me a $50,000 digital branding contract. I was terrified. I hired a graphic designer and a copywriter from Upwork. We worked like maniacs. We turned a dingy basement into a buzzing creative hub. The launch campaign went viral. 1.2 million views. 17% conversion rate. Corvest stock jumped 8%. They signed a 1-year deal. I called my new company, Clarity Creative. Word started spreading. We were the underdogs, lean, scrappy, hungry. Clients were drawn to our energy. Our purpose. We didn't have ping pong tables or fancy offices. We had hustle. One day, our internet cut out in the middle of a live client pitch. We switched to a phone call, delivered the entire strategy by voice. The client said, "If this is how you adapt under pressure, we're in." They signed a 6-month retainer. We reinvested everything. No salaries for the first 90 days. Just stipends and faith. Every time we won a client, we rang a tiny bell I'd found at a thrift store. That sound? It kept us going. I hired my first full-time employee, Leah, a strategist who'd also left Ellison after Brad stole her pitch. We worked 12-hour days, survived on coffee, hummus, and ambition. I opened a business account with $1,200. Designed a logo. Built a website. Set up a CRM. Everything from scratch. Every client we landed had a personal story. One said, "You're what agencies were meant to be." I knew we were onto something. Leah and I built systems late into the night, client intake processes, templates for campaign decks, internal branding guidelines. We made mistakes. A lot of them. One client didn't pay on time. Another ghosted us mid-campaign. But we learned. Fast. We created a values-first culture. Weekly check-ins where we didn't just talk deadlines, we talked feelings, boundaries, goals. We celebrated every win, no matter how small. A positive email. A successful A/B test. A social post that got 500 more clicks than expected. Every detail mattered. We found a loft space in Logan Square. Just 800 square feet, but with natural light. That was our upgrade from the basement. I painted one wall teal. Leah brought in succulents. We added a vinyl sticker to the front door, built from belief. We were still small. But people were starting to notice. And we were just getting started. 6 months in, we got a call from Avalon Tech. A $250,000 pitch opportunity. We competed against 4 major agencies, including Ellison and Hargrove. I wore my sharpest suit and pitched like my life depended on it. When we won the bid, I cried in the stairwell. Ellison was in shock. Brad? Silent. Suddenly, people started calling us. Word of mouth. Clients that trusted clarity more than legacy names. We outgrew the basement. Then the loft. Then we signed a 5-year lease on a full floor downtown. That Avalon campaign changed our trajectory. It wasn't just the money, it was the validation. The press coverage. The ripple effect. They gave us the biggest project Avalon had ever outsourced, launching a new app to disrupt the wellness market. We created the brand identity, campaign strategy, video production, influencer rollouts, and performance tracking tools. The campaign reached 10 million users in 60 days. We became the startup whisperers. VC firms began recommending us to their portfolio companies. The Clarity name started trending on LinkedIn. I hired a COO. A client relations director. A head of strategy. Our Slack went from 3 people to 30. We had departments now. We invested in training. We offered benefits. I hosted Friday founder chats to keep our culture personal. For every win, I wrote a handwritten note. Gratitude became our signature. And clarity became unstoppable. Ellison launched a smear campaign. Anonymous articles. Leaked emails. Industry gossip. I didn't react. I responded, with results. We launched a rebrand for a struggling fashion brand. In 6 months, they went from bankruptcy to Vogue front pages. When Forbes ran the headline, "The Clarity Effect," our inbox exploded. Brad tried to poach my staff. One of them recorded him and sent it to me. I forwarded it to HR quietly. Ellison's board began questioning leadership. Brad was stripped of power. One executive told me, "He tried to be you." He's not. But the attacks didn't stop. We faced fake client complaints, social media bots, fake reviews. My personal email was hacked. Photos were leaked. I felt violated. But I refused to let it show. Instead, I doubled down on transparency. We published a monthly ethics report. We opened a client feedback portal. We documented every process and shared it. Clients trusted us even more. I gave a TEDx talk titled, "Integrity is a Growth Strategy." It went viral. And Ellison? Their stock dropped. Clients left. Talent fled. They couldn't survive without manipulation. We survived with clarity. And we thrived. As clarity rose, so did my responsibility. I remembered how lonely I felt when I was passed over. So I started mentoring women in the industry, especially first-gen professionals like me. We launched a program, Rise Together. Weekly workshops, shadow days, access to leadership calls. Women helping women rise. One of my ments, Jaya, pitched a sustainable fashion startup. I introduced her to a VC friend. She got funded in 6 weeks. That felt better than any bonus I'd ever earned. I created a private Slack group for ments, mentors, and allies. Every Friday, we shared our wins, big or small. From salary negotiations to mental health resources, we tackled it all. We held our first Rise Together retreat in a converted barn in Vermont. There were tears, laughter, healing, and an unshakable sense of purpose. I realized, leadership isn't about being in charge. It's about lifting others as you climb. Ellison and Hargrove filed a cease and desist, claiming I stole trade secrets. It was retaliation. We hired a top-tier law firm. The deposition revealed their internal emails, where Brad literally said, "I want to destroy her." The judge dismissed the case with prejudice. Media ran with it. Whistleblower turned CEO shuts down billion-dollar giant. Clients ran. Ellison crumbled. I should have felt triumph. But mostly, I felt exhausted. Leah brought champagne to the office. I didn't drink it. I just stood on the balcony, looking out at the skyline. Justice is heavy. But it's worth it. I called my mother that night. She said, "Maya, you didn't just win. You changed the rules." And that hit deep. We hit $100 million in revenue. Our team had grown to over 300 across 3 continents. But numbers weren't the measure of success that stayed with me. It was the people. The lives we changed. The ones we empowered. I wrote a book, Build Your Own Table. It became a bestseller. Book clubs. Podcasts. TEDx stages. I opened every talk the same way. They gave my promotion to the boss's son. So I built an empire. We launched Clarity Capital, a seed fund for women-led tech startups. Sponsored scholarships. Partnered with underserved schools to offer digital marketing boot camps. Our first cohort saw 5 founders launch full-fledged businesses. One of them, an Afro-Latina coder from the Bronx, now runs a fintech app with 400,000 users. One day, I stood in front of a Clarity office in Nairobi. A teenage girl tapped me on the shoulder. "Are you the Maya from YouTube?" I smiled. "Yeah, that's me." She said, "I want to build a company, too." That's when I knew, this was more than revenge. This was revolution. We opened offices in London, Singapore, and Sao Paulo. Each one led by women who had once been told they were too bold, too loud, or not quite leadership material. Clarity's influence became global. Multilingual campaigns. International panels. Collaborations with UN initiatives. We launched a global mentorship network with localized leadership councils. Women in South Korea led AI campaigns. Women in Nigeria launched clean energy brands. Women in Brazil dominated e-commerce verticals. I met with dignitaries, spoke at Davos, and was featured in Time's 100 Most Influential Women. The little voice inside me, the one from the hallway at Ellison, was gone. This was the voice of a global leader. A documentary crew followed us for 18 months. The result, Clarity Rising. It premiered at Sundance and sold to Netflix within a week. The film ended with a shot of me standing on the roof of our Singapore HQ, wind in my hair. City skyline behind me. Voiceover. She didn't just build a company. She built a world. And I wasn't done yet. The moment Clarity Creative rose to national prominence, the media spotlight hit me harder than I ever expected. Suddenly, my every move was analyzed, critiqued, and dissected by commentators, journalists, and strangers online. It was like living inside a pressure cooker, but there was no turning back now. Documentary crews showed up at our office, filming every brainstorming session, every pitch, every late-night coffee run. I wasn't used to cameras in my face, and I found myself having to relearn how to speak, how to pause, how to present a version of myself that the public wanted, but also one that was true. The headlines ranged from glowing to biting: Maya Carter, the woman who changed marketing, to aggressive or ambitious. The woman taking over the industry, to clarity creative, too focused on women or forward thinking. Social media was a battlefield. I read angry threads questioning if I was too aggressive, if I was cutthroat, or if I was playing the victim. Some praised me as a visionary leader. Others dismissed me as a sore loser who couldn't handle being passed over. The narrative was out of my control. One day, a journalist asked me during a live TV interview, "Maya, do you think you're too focused on women, maybe even excluding men in your company and leadership?" I took a breath, steadying my voice, and said, "If that's the biggest concern, then I'd say we're doing just fine. We're building a company where people are judged on merit, passion, and results, not on gender or background." The reaction was electric. Viewers sent messages of support, and some critics softened their tone. But the pressure didn't let up. Every decision, every project, every hire was scrutinized as if I were on trial. At night, the weight of expectation settled heavy on my chest. I remembered the nights I cried alone in the office, the self-doubt that crept in. The woman who was told she was too much was now under a microscope magnifying every imperfection. One day, a letter arrived in the mail, old school, handwritten. It was from my high school English teacher, Mrs. Whitman. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but she wrote that she showed my interviews to her students so they could see what power looks like in a woman. Reading her words, something inside me shifted. I realized I wasn't just building a business or defending my name, I was a role model. And that responsibility was bigger than any critique. I wiped my eyes, took a deep breath, and stepped in front of the camera again. This time, no hesitation. No apology. Just clear, confident purpose. As the media storm raged on, a quieter question began to take root in my mind: what next? Clarity Creative was no longer a startup. It was a powerhouse. But was I ready to be CEO forever? Was that really the path I wanted? I began thinking long-term. Not just about my legacy, but about the company's future and the people who would carry it forward. I wanted to be a catalyst, a bridge, not a permanent fixture. Leah, my first hire, had blossomed into a strategic mastermind. She had the vision, the empathy, and the respect from the team and clients alike. I knew she was ready for more. We started building a formal succession plan. Weekly leadership sessions, mentoring programs, shadow days, all designed to prepare Leah and others for their future roles. Slowly, I began stepping back. It wasn't easy. The rhythm of meetings, pitches, and crises was ingrained in me. But one by one, I relinquished control. One fewer meeting. One fewer client call. I took a sabbatical. A month unplugged in a remote cabin in Montana. No phone, no laptop, just snow, trees, and the crackling of a fire. I journaled every morning, reflecting on what it meant to lead, to let go, to trust. My first journal entry was simple: letting go is not the same as giving up. Back in the city, Leah called me one afternoon, breathless with excitement. She'd just closed a $1.2 million account with a cutting-edge tech startup. "You taught me how to believe in myself," she said. I cried. At the same time, my nephew in Atlanta had started his own digital agency. He asked me to mentor him. I realized the cycle was coming full circle. This time, I was the one guiding the next generation. As I stepped out of the CEO role, I also began to explore new ventures, impact investing, philanthropy, mentoring women beyond marketing. I founded Clarity Impact Ventures, a fund dedicated to supporting social entrepreneurs around the world. I traveled to India, South Africa, and Chile, meeting founders who were tackling clean water, education, and disaster relief. Each story humbled me. Each success made me realize my revenge story had evolved into something much greater, a legacy. During my sabbatical, while most people saw a CEO taking a break, I saw an opportunity to learn and grow beyond the boundaries of traditional business. I traveled to countries I had only read about: India, South Africa, Chile, places pulsing with energy, hope, and challenges that felt urgent and real. In Mumbai, I met Aisha, a young tech founder working on a low-cost water purification system. She showed me a prototype that could transform millions of lives in rural communities. Watching her eyes light up when she talked about her mission made me realize that this wasn't just business, it was lifeblood. In Cape Town, I encountered Sifo, who created an education app that taught coding to kids who otherwise had no access to tech training. He talked about the barriers: unstable internet, lack of devices, but his determination was unshakable. In Santiago, I met Catalina, a disaster relief coordinator using data analytics to predict and prepare for wildfires and earthquakes. She was a former engineer turned activist, driven by a fierce passion to protect vulnerable communities. I realized these founders weren't looking for typical investors. They needed partners who believed in their purpose as much as their potential profits. That's when the idea for Clarity Impact Ventures was born. We launched the fund with a modest but ambitious goal: back 12 social entrepreneurs in 12 months. We scoured through hundreds of applications, meeting founders face to face, learning their stories, their dreams, their struggles. I slept on floors in startup hubs, shared street food with teams working 16-hour days, and witnessed firsthand the courage it took to start something meaningful in the face of uncertainty. One founder told me, "Your fund didn't just believe in my idea, it believed in me." Those words hit me harder than any client praise or media accolade ever could. The fund grew. We expanded into sectors like renewable energy, women's health, and educational tech. We connected founders with mentors, investors, and each other. We weren't just providing capital, we were building a community. This new frontier taught me lessons no boardroom ever could. Patience. Resilience. Humility. Listening without agendas. My role shifted from CEO to facilitator, champion, and sometimes cheerleader. I witnessed incredible innovation, but also deep systemic challenges. At night, I'd journal by candlelight, reflecting on the incredible privilege and responsibility of this work. I realized that my revenge story, the one about getting passed over and taking clients, was no longer the defining narrative. This was bigger. This was legacy. I was no longer fighting to prove myself to a single company or boss. I was fighting to open doors for thousands. This was the true meaning of building your own table, creating space not just for yourself, but for everyone who deserved a seat. Months after launching Clarity Impact Ventures, I received an invitation that felt like destiny: keynote speaker at Northwestern University's annual Leadership Summit, the very school where I earned my MBA while juggling a full-time job. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of eager faces, I felt the full weight and wonder of the journey I'd traveled. I began with the story I knew well: they gave my promotion to the boss's son. At the time, it felt like a crushing defeat, like I was invisible. But I refused to stay invisible. I refused to be passed over and forgotten. Instead, I took the clients, the talent, the vision, and I built something they could never touch. The room erupted in applause. I shared stories of betrayal, grit, and grit again. I talked about how I turned the tables on the system built to keep me down, how every late night, every doubt, every setback was fuel to a fire that now burns brighter than ever. Brad Ellison? He's no longer a threat. His name is barely whispered in the industry. The company that gave him the promotion? They're struggling to keep up with the empire I built from the ground up. I told the crowd, revenge isn't just about getting even. It's about rising so high that your success drowns out the noise of those who tried to hold you back. After the talk, a young woman approached me, eyes wide with a mixture of nerves and hope. She said, "I just got passed over for a promotion. I don't know if I should stay or leave." I handed her my card and said, "I've been where you are. And I promise, the best revenge is building your own empire." That conversation led to coffee meetings with 6 other women, all talented, ambitious, and at crossroads. One of them had a business idea, a digital platform connecting freelance creatives with brands. By the end of the hour, we'd outlined a brand strategy and a funding plan. I saw that spark ignite again, the same fire that had fueled me years ago. Later, I stood outside a Clarity office in Nairobi, where a teenage girl tapped my shoulder and said, "Are you Maya from YouTube?" I smiled and said, "Yes, that's me." She said, "I want to build a company too." I looked up at the sky and whispered to myself, this is the revenge they never saw coming. I had taken my pain, my anger, and my disappointment, and turned it into power, purpose, and legacy. I didn't just get my promotion. I got something far sweeter, the last laugh.